Okay, this will probably be a short storage provider meetup. These things are coming. Seems like we just had this yesterday, but here it is again. I guess that's just because the days are really passing by quickly, and partly that's because a lot of things are happening. Most of it's behind the scenes and under the. To me, this all fits perfectly, and it's like there's been a really long continuous thread, so to speak. But that's because I'm, 110% this. And so I'm always thinking about this, and this is the only thing I'm thinking about. And it's like, to me, it just all sort of meshes as a long, continuous thing. And I know that isn't the case for you guys. You guys have lives, you're doing other things. This is one little thing in your life, and you're paying a little attention from time to time, and then, you got other things. And so it's often hard for you to see the thread. But look, I want to go back just, to kind of give you this overview, because if you don't really take anything away from this development cycle, the product, the stuff, I think you should take this next little bit with you, because I think it's really important. And I also think that it informs on certain things that are going on that we kind of knew would be going on this cycle, that are frustrating to some degree, but also expected. So everything that we do in crypto, right, as a base crypto project, has a predicate behind it of Bitcoin's halving cycles, right? And I don't think, to be frank about it, if Satoshi had it to do over again, looking at it today, that he would make a halving the way that he's done. The deal is that the halvings have created a really weird ecosystem, earthquake cycle that is very interesting, to say the least, but it's also been pretty challenging in some ways. And then all the other projects just sort of follow behind it, because everything gets measured against the king, crypto. And so, if you look at our coin was modeled on Bitcoin, for instance. And when the DAA was created for our chain, it was built to be a very linear process. Every single block, the supply emission declines very tiny amount. So it's just very smooth, right? So we don't really have that halving cycle. But with Bitcoin, it's every 4 years. Every 4 years, what happens is the number of coins that are mined per block cuts in half. It causes some enormous disruption for the people that are running these big mining companies. It causes all kinds of planning and disruption to the picks and shovel people like Bitmain and the companies that make miners for the various coins that are out there. So it's just really kind of a thing. But what it does is it creates a cycle, right? Now, this cycle was pretty interesting, because if you looked at previous cycles, what you would see is that you would, see people talking about, well, it's the halving, and so what happens is the mining companies and the miners, become unprofitable, and then the pressure gets put on by the whales, and then the weak miners leave, and and then that clears out the space for the new miners, and then the people start to accumulate coins, and then that leads to a cycle. And so that was always sort of the, people just took that for granted, that was what was actually going on. But this cycle, two things have happened that are different. And one is a number of people have stood up and said, it may not actually be the halving at all. It just so happens that the halving is coinciding in a certain kind of way, because it's operating on a 4 year cycle. It just so happens that the 4 year cycle is also sort of like the global business cycle. And so what ends up happening is that when the crypto bull cycle runs, it also tends to be the same time that the global liquidity cycle is running. And we've been at the bottom of the global liquidity cycle for the last 1.5 years. And so it's now starting that process of turning upwards. And we're starting to see all those typical things that happen at the beginning of a global liquidity cycle. And global liquidity is banks get easier on giving out money, interest rates get lower, more money supply shows up. And so what ends up happening is that as a global liquidity cycle, starts to trend upwards and then ultimately peak, all that easy money sloshes around and funds a lot of risky type stuff. And that's where risk on assets become really popular and very, powerful again. And so there's a lot of people, even many right here in our Discord, that just don't believe that another cycle's coming. They think we're headed towards like a big recession, or they think that things are, Bitcoin's headed downwards to whatever, they have all kinds of thoughts and ideas about why doom is on the way and not, this next phase of the cycle. But the fact of the matter is, there is nothing in any of the charts, in any of, what's going on, in any of the big macroeconomic indicators to suggest anything other than we are on the front end of a bull cycle. And, as we get into that business cycle, cryptos will follow and echo the Bitcoin move up. And so that's how we are planning the next 12 to 18 months. So what I started with was saying to you that it's been a continuous thread for me. And I've always tried to remind people where we are in the cycle. So when people showed up, to our coin in December of 2021, maybe I wasn't as loud as I could have been. I did kind of say the rent is too damn high a few times, but what ended up happening was a bunch of people ended up showing up to buy our altcoin right at the end of the last liquidity cycle, right? Or the last halving cycle or the last Bitcoin cycle. And so, 2022 turned into that big steep dump, and then 2023 was sort of the, beginning of the recovery year. And then, of course, 2024 has been pretty interesting to say the least, because we got ETFs on both Ethereum and Bitcoin. And so what comes next is what's really what matters. At the same time, there's been some people that have put out this thing called the power law for Bitcoin, which is essentially modeling some math around the amount of hash rate and the price and value of Bitcoin to this power law. And the thing about the power law that is somewhat attractive to me is that it also shows the cycles pretty clearly, but it shows the cycles, getting lower and lower and lower, that they don't go as high. So you have a bunch of people right now that are, talking about Bitcoin 1 million or whatever, and, crazy numbers. And it very well could do that because we have new players, but the way the power law is saying it is probably around 350,000 this cycle. So 6x maybe from where we are right now on Bitcoin. In my view, where we are, all I can do is tell you my view, and where the project feels we are is at the front end of the next cycle. We feel like if we didn't do anything right now, like if, for instance, a hurricane came and took out our entire team, started in Colorado, went all the way to Europe, then over to New Zealand and took everybody out, pretty cool hurricane, I think we'd still run pretty hard this cycle, right? Because that's how it works. It's just how it works. And, the people that demand exabytes of storage before the coin can be 50 cents, I can't, explain that to you. Anyway, that's where we are in the cycle, and that's what we believe. So why I'm telling you that is because if you looked at the last cycle, we didn't fully take advantage of it. I think we did a decent enough job, but we were hamstrung in a couple of ways, and ultimately we got taken a little bit by surprise by the way it came together. This cycle is a little different because in the last cycle, if you want to know kind of where I think we are today, where we would have been then, it would be like August, September of 2020, right? That's about where I think we are right now. But if you think about it, we didn't actually get a whole bunch of you showing up until December of 2021. So that, literally about 16 months later. And that's where I think we are. I truly think that's where we are. From that regard, we've been doing our level best to make sure that we have all of our, pieces and products and network stuff and everything ready to go in advance of that so that we can take full advantage of it. Over the last decade, startup culture has kind of revolved or devolved or evolved, whatever, however you want to see it, to this notion that was created in Silicon Valley about fast failing and pivoting and all this other sort of stuff. And what happens is that people will start these tech startups, and then essentially what will happen is after about 6 months, if they don't have significant ARR, what ends up happening is they pivot to something else. They take their tech and they figure out how they can do something because they figure that they've failed if they haven't got there in 6 months and they haven't got it done and so forth. So that's a pretty common thing. And I think there's a lot of that in crypto, by the way. There's a lot of people that do these projects, and then if they don't really get anywhere, they really kind of just sort of move on and do whatever. You couldn't really do this kind of foundational infrastructure project unless you were totally committed to seeing it through, i.e., we would have pivoted 2-3 years ago, right? Because we had a relayer working in 2020, and we could have called it MVP and tried to onboard, but look, we never would have got any real customers. We just never would have, because they would have said, well, where's this, we need this, we can't trust our corporate data to this, right? And so slowly but surely over time, we fleshed out all those pieces, and we're very close now. We still have a couple of key things that need to get done, but there's nothing right now that should prevent somebody from coming aboard. I'll give you a perfect example of that, by the way. So we have one customer, might be in the audience. I can't see the audience, so I don't actually know who's here. But we have one guy right now who's doing some trials, and who's pretty much adamant that certs have to be here before he'll upload serious, significant data. Okay, I get it. It is a thing. We've got another MSP who has approached us, and we've been talking with them at length. They're actually somewhat near the same neighborhood. They're actually in Sweden. And, he just told me, he said, certs don't really matter, right? And he sells to the same kinds of customers. He's a distributor to other MSPs. And so, you can hear that answer coming in different ways from different potential customers. It's definitely something we're going to finish and get done, but it isn't something that we feel like we can't sell product without. We feel like we can very well sell product without it, and so we are out there now starting to make those kinds of storage customer contacts. This is different than almost everything. It's different than regular startups in that we really knew we were never going to pivot away. We're going to see this thing through. Unfortunately, we also run into the problem on the crypto side, because on the crypto side, because we have kept this dogged determination to do this, a lot of the people that are there, I use the term derogatorily a lot, tourists, but if you look at a lot of these people who are, we're deep in this, deep in that, but, where were they 2 years ago, right? Where exactly were they? They were probably not involved, right? They were probably off doing something else because crypto was dead. They weren't grinding, right? Like we were grinding. Every excuse or reason under the sun why, people in the crypto world don't recognize us and look to us as being leaders is they don't have a complete end-to-end product that actually works more performantly, more securely, more durably, more availably than AWS does, and we do. So anyway, I wanted to get that out of the way. I know it was long-winded and I know it took a long time, but I think ultimately if you go back and listen to that, I think it will help inform you as far as what we're doing, why you're here, what is happening, and it will really put some context under things like, well, I don't have a lot of data on my machine yet. No, you don't. But what you do have is you have a whole bunch of incentives tokens and coins, and you have a whole bunch of other things that we've done because we knew that it was going to take this amount of time to get the product out there and to get it working properly to make it work. I would just counsel everybody to think a little bit about coin valuation and how it affects the overall architecture. your development update. We've got a couple of really kind of big things to talk about here today. So first of all, the one I want to show, and we're not really, I don't really have a ton of context on this yet. It's just basically it's something to tell you. I think ultimately it's going to become extremely important. But one of the things that happened, and if you kind of go back in history, and if you go onto the XNS website resourcing, you'll see that we've always said that relayers are, robust pieces of server software that required significant memory and CPU, because what they were doing is they were ingressing all of this data and they were chopping it up and encrypting it, and then they were turning around, encrypting it and chopping it up, and then turning around and ultimately getting it out to the network. And that process of encrypting and chopping up at the same time ended up using a ton of CPU, right, and also a ton of memory. And one of the things that was really the governor of that was how much pipeline you had. If you had a big internet performance, then what would happen is you could throw a lot of processor horsepower and a lot of memory at a system, and ultimately you could get crazy upload speeds. I mean, just insane upload speeds. So the whole notion there, though, was you're gonna have to build a pretty beefy machine around it to make it work. And that's kind of part and parcel what drove us to this new RelayerXM SFF platform that we have, is that it was one of the first models that came out that had enough processor to it and had enough memory capacity to it to make it actually do that. But the cool thing is that the guy who actually built designed the small part of the engine internally of the relayer called HostIO way back in 2020, right? We always knew there were some optimizations we can do, and Pavel has been doing a lot of optimization actually over the last several years, and it's become a very integral part of our stack. It's literally our core IP in a lot of ways. And the deal is that the original developer came back and put some time in to work exactly on memory. And one of the things that's happened here, and I'll just zoom this up a little bit, is he's just hit it out of the park here on this optimization, because this was the previous branch, the current examiner or relayers that are out there. And what you're looking at is a chart with a scale that is gigabytes. So typically on a typical HostIO process, we were kicking it up and hitting 10 to 15 gigabytes here, for the processes that go in there. And it's not just HostIO. There's other apps in that stack, the gateways, the various other things, the S3 stuff that we have in there. So there's a lot of memory use, right? But if you look at today on our current commit, right, that chart is actually 200 megabyte up to 1,000 megabyte, which is 1 gig, right? So we're talking about a gigantic exponential order of magnitude drop in resourcing needed for relayers than what we had previously. And this is going to be a giant watershed for this thing, because it's going to mean that you can, build them out in a lot of different ways. It's going to really mean that people are not going to have to spend an arm and a leg to put relayers in place. You'll be able to not have to say, well, I got to go 96 gigs of memory just to upload my Game of Thrones collection or whatever. And so I can't really go too much further yet on it because we're still in the testing process. But this is what it looks like. And so we're all just like extremely excited right now internally about that. So, okay, so that's that. Another thing that we've been working on internally is something that we're calling tags for lost data. Right now, every relayer uploads on a default provider set. We're tweaking and tuning that default provider set, and this is going to go to some of the rebate stuff. But essentially what happens is, we are looking at the providers that show up. And a number of providers have shown up. They bought in maybe at $2 on the coin. They bought some Examiner gear. They ended up buying a license, whatever. And then, they started asking the question, when data? And then, 2023 rolled through, when data? And it was like, then they would start posting this thing. And I said last 2 meetings in a row, and I'll say it 3 in a row just for Beetlejuice. If you really want to disturb me, right, all you have to say is, I'm losing money on this thing. right? Because you're essentially saying that all of the incentives that we built specifically to cover you until data, right, aren't somehow relevant or don't matter or aren't part of the equation. But they are, and a lot of people have a lot of coins now, and that is the thing that ultimately is going to turn you guys into hopefully an army. But it's going to be a smaller army than what showed up originally because a lot of people have said once they realized after 16 months or whatever that, oh, there's no data, there must never going to be data, and those machines have gone offline, and or that they just had really bad, uptime and so forth. So the tags for lost data is essentially going to say, well, look, how much data did you lose? How much data have you lost over the last, 16 months or ever since you set up your device? And if you lost a lot of data, like if you let one or two contracts fail and so forth, and you went offline for 2 months and then came back and whatever, you will be excluded from the default provider sets and you won't be able to come back until you start to clean that up, right? So you'll have to put in a period, a probationary period to come back around. Most people will not be that bad. They will be somewhere in the middle and they will get, deducted, but that it'll take less time for them to come back around. Same thing for these rebates, right? We're giving out rebates only to people that have a certain uptime and who haven't left. People that show back up next week that are in a pending status right now or, big red bar on their thing and the contract fail and zero storage, I'm sorry, you're not going to get the rebates because when there's a lot of real customer data at stake, that churn is very expensive. So this is a good process, and the people that have stuck it out are going to end up doing well on that. So tags for lost data is going to exclude a lot of those people. That will cause more people to drop off the network and leave, and ultimately I suspect that 50 petabytes will ultimately end up maybe down around 40 when it's all said and done. But it should start trending upwards again here as we move into the next year. So that's that. So that's kind of the deal there, and I'll talk further about the rebates in a little bit. Another part of the development that's moving along is this points token. Right now we're about 5 months or 4.5 months into season 1 of the D2X airdrop season. There is a large sum of D2X that is waiting to be handed out to people that are first and foremost right now providing LP over on the Solana chain. And everybody that's doing that is showing up in this chart, right? And you can go back and you can see who was here in the preseason. Then you can see what happened in April and May and June and July. And right now, the leaderboard has GGT is still the leader and champion. He's really pumping hard to keep that spot. He's way ahead of everybody. 8K2 has been pretty solid there. In fact, 8K2 is somebody who I expect will ultimately probably onboard quite a bit of storage to the network at some point. 7TH, a few of these others are kind of new than when they showed up, but they really quickly vaulted up to the top of the deal. Essentially, these are going to translate over directly into D2X tokens if you so want. If you want to keep them as points, you can do that, right? But essentially, what will happen there is we will move to building out a point store, right? Where you can buy RelayerXMs, you can buy X miners, you can buy other pieces, storage on the network, you can buy bits and things like that. That will ultimately, improve your existence here. We'll have merch, all that sort of stuff that'll be in there, and you'll be able to use points for all of that. So I think some people are going to want to keep points. Some people are going to want to immediately turn them into D2X. I don't know. I don't care. We'll see. But there is a significant amount of D2X that is there. Season 1 ends in September, and then that first batch will get paid out. And I think at that point, people will wake up and start to realize what's going on, because just like every other airdrop, people are going to be standing up going, oh my God, look at how much I've earned, right? It's crazy. It's insane. And then next season will probably be a little bit more rational, although I still think it's going to be pretty crazy. as people realize what it, what it is and what it means and what you need to do it. And then I think you'll start to see a bunch more people show up and get in there. But you still have a chance to get in season one, and you probably should, but it's up to you, obviously. Providing LP is not necessarily easy. You do have to take a little time to learn how it works, and but there's people in the channel that will help you out, and there's materials on that. So that token exists right now, and so it will show up in Solana wallets as a token. It won't be a token that you can swap like in Phantom for another token, but it will show up in your Phantom wallet, and it will be able to be swapped for D2X. So that little mechanism is close to existing right now. So the developer's working hard on that. Like I said, the next thing up is the point store update and some of that sort of stuff. I just want to touch on this briefly. We posted earlier this month in the tokenomics, and in case anybody ever asks you for the elevator pitch, there are two tokens. There's SCP and D2X. SPF are not tokens. They are nothing. They are precursors to tokens. They live on this chain. They have no exchange. They've never been offered for sale. They just don't exist in any kind of generalized way. All they do is earn money for the storage that's on the network. So they're precursors to the token, which is actually this. I don't yet have an update on claims yet on D2X. That will be coming probably in the next call. But I wanted to just highlight this right here. We did put away 200 million of the SPF tokens into a time-locked wallet. The time-locked wallet runs until block height 350,000, which is a little under a year away now at this point. So the point of that is that we will continue to time lock these things year after year after year. We will open them up once a year in some sort of ceremony, probably at one of these meetups. And then ultimately what we will do is send the tokens to a new address, which will then allow us to capture the SCP that are in there to use for storage operations. And then they would be time locked back up again for another year. So the whole point of this is that when you start talking about the supply that's available for people to transact with and trade and do all that sort of stuff, there really are only 200 million potential tokens. Right now, there's like 40 some million on the D2X Solana blockchain. But, over time, that will ultimately resolve out to being closer to that 200 million number. But it will never go over 200 million because these 200 million will continue to be locked up and stay in this hole for as long as we need going forward. Okay. I'm going to get to the meat of the thing with the RelayerXM, the rebates, the discounts, the sales that are going on right now. And then I'm going to talk briefly a little bit about some concerns and then Q&A. So first of all, the Examiner store, everything that's going on there right now, there is this big set of sale prices. Let's go back to the store. If you come into the drop-down menu, you can see it. Essentially all of the pieces right now. For one, Examiners are discounted super heavily right now. So $9.25 I think is the best price that you've ever been able to get on an MT. This is going to run probably for several months, but the beauty there is that if you've wanted one of these devices, the time to get them is right now, because the price is so good. And then along with that, we also have the full license, which is discounted to $225. That's actually a mistake there on the 2500 SPF. I need to change that. But the deal is that what we've done there with the full license is we've said we're sunsetting it, right? That we are just going to move to being an all device driven thing. And that there's some, angst about that, and I get it, and it is what it is. And if you want to hear some enjoyable sport arguing, you can tune in on a Sunday morning when I'm going at it with somebody who's, doesn't like our business model. But the point of it is that all these DePIN projects tend to have just one device, where they have a device and then multiple manufacturers for the device. Some projects do allow people to self-build DIYs, but frankly, the support burden is just not worth the benefit of who we're going to get to do that. So, it has proven itself out that people that build systems on their own are far less reliable to be around long term than people that buy devices. It just is the case. So I'll put some meat behind that in just a second. But so the deal here is that that'll be here probably for another 1 to 2 months, and then it'll go away altogether, and you will no longer be able to buy license. Primarily, it's out there to bring all the basics that still want to be here up to speed, because if you don't have a full license, you don't enjoy and participate in anything, right? You just get storage. So this is your chance to get into the game and stay there. The full license will always be grandfathered to be real nodes. I mean, we're never going to, take that away because they paid money for them. But all right, let's talk a little bit about these new rebates. So part of what we're trying to do here is we're trying to sort of even up a little disparity that took place when we did the remit SCP for D2X. We had no idea what D2X was going to do once it hit the exchanges. What it did was really surprising to me in some ways. I kind of wish that we could have guided it, but what can you do? Market's the market. We maybe, if we could have released them at a different time in the market, maybe it would have been different, but it was what it was. So the deal is that we are giving the people who did rebate remission from SCP to SPF a little bit of a make good in the form of a continued new 1-year rebate period. So it's only for those players right now, the people that remitted rebates. And if you did do that, then essentially on Examiner 64 terabyte qualifies for 15,000 SPFs. 40 terabyte units earn a little over 11,000, and 16 terabyte units earn 7,500. And then those will be paid out on equal installments over 3, 6, 9, and 12 months. As you maintain 95% uptime. To qualify, your unit needed to be online last week. It needed to have a 93% uptime. The good news is that most of the people in the Examiner world meet that criteria. Now, what I've done today is I've been going through all of the full licenses to determine what the kind of burden might exist there if we were to do something for those folks. And first of all, the one thing that I noticed really quickly is that 50% of those people are off or are well below 93%. I mean, it's just ugly. It's like they stuck around, they got their rebates back, they waited, 3 months for one data, and then they left. And you know what? It wasn't like we weren't saying that was going to happen all along, because we knew that was what was going to happen. And so I've never had a fondness for that. I've always considered it a mistake that we offered licensing the way we did, and I wish we hadn't done it. But at the same time, it is what it is. It's not saying that there aren't really good providers running full licenses, because there are. There's probably 200 of them that remitted SCP for SPFs. So I'm looking at those numbers right now and trying to decide what would be a fair way to deal with that. I don't yet have anything for you guys, but I am telling you right now that I am at least looking at it. So the potential for an announcement on that is pretty high soon. Okay, so let's get right to the RelayerXM to talk a little bit further about that. I guess it stays there forever. I'll have to ask James how you actually remove something. This is just all I'm talking about right now. You guys don't know what I'm talking about, but what I'm talking about is that this screen will always be this relayer button here, and then this Examiner button here, and then all these things will show up down below as smaller little bubbles that will be the add-ons that you can do. We covered this last week, but what I want to just show you really quickly is a few things just to remind how this works. So the RelayerXM is this new dashboard installer that really houses both the devices. That both devices come pre-configured, ready to go when you buy this unit and set it up. Essentially, after you get your pre-installed things, and the official things are the Relayer, the Examiner, the map, the Samba mount, and the web wallet. Those are the official corp things right now. And then ultimately, then there will be this growing list of additional add-ons that you can add that will make short work of connecting up to various interesting things. So this is going to become really powerful as this goes forward, as we get hundreds of different community-based add-ons, and as the project adds in, a dozen or 2 dozen additional add-ons that we've developed and worked on. It makes it really powerful for this device. The device is going to just continue to grow in what it can do and how it works. And the really neat thing out of the box right now is this RelayerXM mount, which is the minute you spin up this relayer, you have a networkable drive share that essentially you can, map on your local network on a Windows box or whatever, Mac, whatever, and then ultimately you just drag and drop files into that folder, and then they get uploaded to the cloud. So you can have directory structures in there, you can do whatever. So in that case, it's like a file share to some respect, although it's going to be tied to the relayer machine, not to the individual computers. I think ultimately one of the things that we will build out ultimately, even though I said we plan to be an infrastructure company and not so much an app company, I think we will get a file share built into our thing at some point in the not too distant future. Everybody has it. Apple has iCloud, Azure has, OneDrive, Dropbox, everybody has a file share, Google Drive. So I think we need to have our own file share, and I think the SOM mount is sort of like the precursor in the beginning to that. So that will be one thing that will be to watch for over the coming time. And by the way, from a development standpoint, this was pointed out, and I do have this as a very high priority to-do list item. The roadmap on the ScPrime site is out of date. It did change quite a bit with the launch of this RelayerXM and some stuff. So I expect to go back and get the roadmap updated and cleaned up and get a proper understanding of where we expect to be 18 months from now. So anyway, with this RelayerXM, they are now offered for sale in the Examiner store. And, there's some things in here that are somewhat interesting. The base model actually is $11.99, but you can't actually buy that. You have to get the base level of drives and so forth. And right now, the very base level is, getting 16 gigs of memory, doing these EVOs instead of the Pro drives, right? That adds $180 for 2 EVO 1 terabyte drives. And then that makes the base price for this unit $14.39. Yeah, that's a little, that's stiff. It's a price, I get it. But at the same token, if you remember back in the day, the Examiner 16 terabyte was $1,500 and the 64 was $3,500. And they really weren't, they weren't valued at that high. They weren't really that worth that much, right? The underlying stuff wasn't really worth that much. In this case, that $14.39 doesn't have a lot of fat. It's mostly tech underneath the deal. And look, at the end of the day, this device is a little different than an Examiner in that if ultimately you just threw in the towel and said, I don't want to be here anymore, this device is super powerful and easy enough to convert into anything, right? And, at the end of it, what happens is once you assemble and put it together, you then need to go and add a little bit of storage if you're going to run the Examiner side of the fence. You can either do all NVMe storage by putting in something in here, or you can just plug in something like a passport drive or whatever. Let me zoom this picture up. Just plug something into the USB-Cs or even in the super speed USBs, and then bang, you're good to go. You can go in and map that out. One other screenshot I'll show you really quick from a development standpoint. Developer showed this to us today. This is the storage page, the storage configuration page. So the ability to go ahead and mount storage and add partitions and to do all that work is very close to being ready. This is kind of one of the last things left before we can actually ship the device. So that's really the situation. So the first person to ask about a 2U happened like 2 months ago, and I showed a 3D printed 2U frame that can hold two of these devices for the people that want them in a rack mount. Typically, if you want them in a rack mount, there's a chance you want high availability. And if you do, you might want to buy two of these devices to sit side by side. And then ultimately, we will have the ability to have them share a database so that the two units can actually operate in concert and provide good redundancy for each other. For a busy SME or low enterprise version. So that's a thing. I suspect that we will start selling those little 2U plastic racks shortly, because they're easy enough to get a hold of and they don't cost an awful lot. But yeah, so that exists. Resellers for Europe is definitely a thing. I don't have any kind of a time frame for it because I don't have anybody who's really stepped up and shown me the kind of proper capabilities to do that. It's definitely a thing, but you have to understand it isn't like some sort of magic bullet, by the way, right? It's like, people say, well, if you had a reseller in Europe, then you could, lower your VAT tax charges. And so that's not true. What ends up happening is the reseller themselves can definitely get, VATless purchases over there, and then they can work on a country by country basis, offering, specific VAT prices that, maybe are a little bit lower. More likely in Europe, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to set yourself up as a business so that you can then ultimately turn around and get a tax deduction and get your VAT tax back. So, but that doesn't discount that we still do need a European distributor, and I will continue to keep my eye out for that. But I think there's also another understanding to have here too, by the way. So this device, I think, is going to become a really important device for us going forward. But I also think that what's going to happen is as we start to onboard SMEs and we start to onboard some people that are really doing bigger work, they're going to say, can we get this in a super micro? Because that would really, make my CTO a little bit more happy. And the answer is yes. We can put this OS that we've built onto a super micro platform, and we will start offering those in the store, or potentially offer them as a licensed image file that they can drop on equipment that they have if it meets certain criteria. But of course, it won't just be able to be dropped on anything. You'll have to have purchased a license from us for this whole thing. So that's definitely a thing that's potentially out there. Our whole thing was, this is the new flagship Examiner. This will become the node that's out there in the field. And every single node that's out there in the field running on this platform will have the ability to use the storage that's on the network. That's a divorce that's in place right today, a Chinese wall that's in place right today, where people that have stood up storage providers really don't have any easy way to use the storage. And consequently, it's created sort of this bifurcation that doesn't need and shouldn't exist. And so with this device, what ends up happening is, if you want to be a storage provider, you set this thing up, go. And then if later you say, oh, I have some stuff I want to back up, or I want to, try out the storage myself or whatever, bang, you can fire up the relayer and go, and you can use SCP to pay for it, and ultimately you will have a very good run with it. It's the exact opposite, same thing, right? If you're somebody who is an MSP and you're provisioning for customers, and you're telling the customer, here, you just need to plug this thing in, give me permissions onto the network to this set of ports and addresses, and boom, I'll manage this thing for you, and your people will just have to upload to a directory, or they'll just have to hook Veeam in and use Veeam the way they always use it, or they'll just have to run whatever S3 compatible software. There's no change to what they normally do. But at the same time, why wouldn't we turn on the Examiner and just let it go ahead and do its thing? Because over time, we'll generate SCPs that will ultimately lower the cost of ownership on this device. And my gut tells me that if we sell 100,000 customers on uploading storage to our network over the next couple of years, that's 100,000 relayers that are out there, and ultimately that should be 100,000 Examiners that are helping to make up the network, right? In fact, to my way of thinking, that's going to be the ultimate ideal Examiner customer, is somebody who's using storage on the network, because they're not just here for the crypto pump, or they're not just here for the deep in, passive income thing. They're here because they actually use the product storage itself. So I think they're going to be the strongest, most durable, most robust Examiner customers. But I'm sure that this original 2 to 3,000 will always continue to be really robust and solid for us. The other thing I want to just say about that, right, is that potentially we might roll some relayer features into these current examiners just to make them a little bit, more useful for the folks that have them. At some point, this examiner that's currently in the world will go away, and that is just what it is. But these units are going to work for 5-10 years. I mean, they're going to be on our network for a long, long time, and we hope they stay forever. So that's a thing, and it should be a thing. And we still love that platform. It's built the best network in crypto. It's literally a very beautiful network right now that is doing a great job for what it needs to do. So anyway, that's kind of the little bit on the thing. I think partners that when we do finally get back to onboarding real partners, MSPs, at that point, once we get that thing going again, this thing will be a heck of a sale for them. I think they will probably put them in every single instance. There'll probably be some RelayerMT still things out there for sure, but I think the lion's share will get these devices since they're so easy. All right. Last thing I want to talk just briefly about I'll talk just a little bit about customers. Like I said, we are in a place right now where we are starting to talk to customers. I'm doing a lot of, guerrilla work there. We still don't have any money for marketing, so it's still kind of a wait for crypto to go up, wait for the coin prices to go up so we can get some funding for marketing. But at this point, I am doing some contact and reach out and getting some people to take the bait and come in and listen and potentially do some trials. And we have a couple of other big trials that are going on that could very soon turn into actual significant real data. The thing about it is that I'm not, immune to understanding how that plays. Just like I've kind of discounted that all along through this call, because I do believe very clearly that it should not be a hurdle to anything going on with the community, anything going on with the technology, anything going on with the coin values, the market cap of the project, any of that sort of stuff. I also think that it can be a gigantic sort of additive horsepower, thing to the project. So, for instance, I talked to this other MSP just last week, and he was pretty excited about it. He came from Cloudian, so he gets it. He totally gets it, right? And so his thing was he thought it was pretty interesting, pretty exciting, and I think we'll get him going on some trial data. But the numbers he was talking about were the kind of numbers that I sort of expect from MSPs. They look at the network, say how much capacity, and we're like 50 petabytes. We're pretty proud of that. And in crypto, that's a lot of data storage, on the network. But for an MSP, they've got hundreds of petabytes for just multiple one customer type deals, right? So it's like when we find the right MSP partners to show up and they get some trials out of the way, that 50 petabytes is just going to get slammed with data quickly, right? Bitmain is the last thing to talk about because I think it's also a pretty powerful part of this. At the end of the day, they have a whole bunch of miners to sell. We think they're going to sell them for us since they took a lot of time to partner up with us and to, become our compatriots in this business and to invite us to a trade show and to put us up on stage and to do various things with us. They sold an initial batch only to our community. Yeah, a few bleeded out to distributors, but and then magically the price went up. Who knew, right? Who knew? The price went up somehow on the coin, and now it's dropped back down, of course. And oddly, I said that probably was going to happen, and here we are. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand what's coming next, right? They didn't do all this with us to sell 250 miners. They have 5,000 miners to sell. Right? We are the coin for that miner. So, maybe you're thinking to yourself, well, they're just going to wait until we pump the coin and then they'll sell all these miners. Well, maybe that might happen. I wouldn't, completely take me by surprise if that was how this was going to work. But I don't think so. I think it's going to be that mystical thing that whenever Bitmain sells a miner on a coin, the coin goes up in response to the batches that they release. But that's still a very, very important part of this, because one of the things that I'm really focused on, I talked to you at the beginning, was all of these concerns. Like, we're not included in a lot of things. When we do start taking conferences, when we do start taking shows, when we start taking specific marketing, paid marketing opportunities that we travel to and do that stuff, they'll be storage related. They'll be directly related to presenting our products to MSPs so that we can sell storage. Because we're going to trump all those people that are out there trying to get mind share to pump coins. All they're doing is trying to get a bunch of people together to own each other's coins and to talk about them on Twitter and get all the coals aligned so that ultimately when retail comes pouring back into crypto, they can all, be right there at the top of the charts and ready to rock and get all their coin prices up. But that's not actually what's going to happen. What we expect to have happen is exactly the when data question. Once that data gets slammed into the network, we will see very significant and serious interest from retail people, because they'll look and they'll say, holy cow, this thing's real. And not only is it just real, not only is it utility or fundamentals are good or blah, 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 but this project has something that all these other ones don't have. Like if I show up and say, look, I want to do decentralized storage on IoTeX, and they have all this modular stuff. I can just bolt in an L1. I can bolt in a smart contracting platform. I can bolt in a token. I can bolt in all this other stuff. What exactly are you building? Right? I mean, you could get an AI to actually write the code for you to glue all that stuff together. You really don't need to have any kind of specific expertise or anything. And then what you have to do is figure out how to build a device and sell it. And, I think people will do okay with that. But look, we already have, thousands of providers, 50 petabytes of capacity, a whole platform that's engineered to actually provide storage in a Web 2 format, right? And a way to provide passive income earning to people that come with incentives. So when the people come along and say, we're looking for projects that have real utility, we don't want the Brett coin on base, we're going to be sitting here with the full, like 4 aces in our hand. So I think it's really important to think about that and to understand how it's going to play out through the cycle. But anyway, that's the call. I have been watching to see if there's questions, and I've just been kind of answering them as they've gone, so I doubt there's going to be a lot of extra ones. Will there be developer info for adding custom apps onto the XM? Yes, that's the whole point of the add-on repository, right? What will end up happening is you'll be able to go into that Git. You'll be able to, copy and, decide what you want to make of yours. And then once you do it, you'll send it through for approval. And once we approve them, then what will end up happening is they will start showing up on RelayerXM in this catalog, and people will be able to use them. So that's a thing. All right, let me look further through the questions. Yeah, one of the things about licensing, and I think that it will get a lot, easier to do some of this, cross pollination, is that the XM miners themselves don't have a license key on them, and that turned out to be a bit of a mistake. And they also were not really originally built in Linux containers, and so they're kind of weird in some ways. I mean, they worked really great and did a great job for us, but we changed that. The new XM miner is actually running in a Dockerized world now, and so it's a lot closer to the XM full than it used to be. It still runs the full supervisor, but supervisor itself is going away and will be replaced with more direct access. So it's likely going to be the case that we will find ways to allow people to do migrations. But, I'm not going to migrate right now. I'm not going to say to somebody, oh, you can upgrade your XM miner directly to a RelayerXM. We put a whole bunch of time into that today, because why would I do that? I mean, that would be like cannibalizing the network to get, what? I mean, nothing. Just you guys would put one of these devices in, there'd be no additional additive part to the network, and we'd actually, end up not really seeing any benefit. It's just a cannibalization. I'm not saying we won't do that. We will do it, but it isn't the first step. The first step is get this thing out there and get new people involved and able and ready. And we're highly incentivizing these things with rebates in order to generate that. And so it could be 6 months before we allow those kinds of full migrations, but they are definitely on the slate, but it will be a bit before that actually shows up. So this box is interesting internally in that it does have a PCIe slot, but it's short depth and it's one slot high. So there's not really any GPUs out there that make any sense from a compute standpoint for this. There are some good short depth cards out there that would work really well. I think the A2000 is a good model, but it's a two slot card, and that's too big for this device. So this device could actually work in that regard by using via the Thunderbolt USB-C connections to one of these external GPU caddies, right? So there are manufacturers out there that build GPU caddies that can plug into a device, and it's quite possible that this thing could do that. We've been in conversation with another compute-related project about potentially working with them, and so there's some possibilities out there. It's not something we're putting much of our focus into today, but in the future it could be something. So backup is getting a whole overhaul, and that's part of this RelayerXM thing. For one, all of these units are shipping with rated NVMEs to begin with, so hardware failure goes away as a thing. But the second part is contract corruption. And so the next piece that we're going to be adding into these deals at some point is going to be this thing where auto backups take place to the cloud. And then ultimately, our lead developer has come up with an idea that essentially salts these hashes down to just a simple phrase so that you can, recover this stuff that's in the cloud with just one little password, which is useful because if the whole thing ever just like blows up on you and you need to recover your data, it's kind of like this inception thing, right? Because you upload data, you have metadata that it tells where it's all loaded. If you upload your metadata to the cloud, then you get metadata of the metadata. And so you have to somehow keep the metadata, right? But on the examiners, it's impossible to keep the metadata because the minute like an hour passes, the metadata is no longer good, and because the contracts have changed enough significantly, so it becomes a real problem. So two things that we're working on. The one I just said, which is recover by seed, which is something that has been a holy grail for this project for a long time. But then the other one is, and I just had it, but I just lost it. What is the other one? Contract recovery from conductor. So what ends up happening is that very shortly, like within a week or two, we should have this ability to put into the UI, if say a contract goes corrupt, where instead of pulling from your own metadata backups, you can pull the conductor server and say, hey, I need another copy of this contract, please. Can you send it to me? And then I'm back up to speed. All my storage is still intact and everything's good. So there's quite a bit of work going on right now for backups. And then I talked a little bit about the relayer backups. High availability shared databasing is another big thing internally that we're working on. And Jay's actually even started working on a thing for Kubernetes configurations. So there's going to be a lot of really powerful SME and enterprise grade stuff coming over the next several months. That roadmap update will really kind of highlight all this. Yeah, I don't really know. I don't think it's going to work the way you're asking on points. I think it's going to work the way it works right now. Points are 1-to-1 to D2X and probably always will be. So if D2X is 2.5 cents or whatever, then you do the math and you can figure out how many points are needed to buy something, right? I think that's always going to be the case. I don't think that changes. So, if the price of D2X goes up to, 30 cents, then you won't take as many to end up buying a RelayerXM. I don't have a time frame yet on when points will be able to be used to buy RelayerXMs, but I have a feeling it's going to be right around the same time that the season 1 ends. So just that's about 5-6 weeks away right now. So there you go. RelayerXMs are probably going to be shipping early September. I've got a bunch of them in the lab right now, so they're ready to start being built out, but we're still waiting to finish up the UI stuff. So, I don't know how the supply chains are going to work on this yet. We'll have to play it by ear and see what happens. Right now, I can fulfill orders, for that first pre-sale batch. Once I hit my limit on that and we have to go back for a re-up, we'll see what the manufacturer looks like. And in terms of that stuff, I'm not trying to coax you into jumping on it, but to be honest with you, if you really want one of these things, I don't think you should be waiting to do it, because I think what's going to happen is you might wait and get shut out for a period of 6 to 8 weeks, waiting for supply chains to catch up with ordering. So right now it's that early period. People that dive in right away are going to end up in a great place, and you might end up in a great place if you don't dive in right away. I just don't know. So there you go. All right. I don't have an answer for that on NFS server. That would be a question probably for our devs, and whether that makes sense for us to do or whether it makes sense for you guys to do. Right now, one of the things that ends up happening is relayers have a very tried and true process for dealing with certs and being able to do various things there for FQDNs and so forth. That seems to cover the lion's share of what most customers are going to be looking for. Stuff beyond that, if somebody can show us the need and if it brings more customers, then yeah, we'll go ahead and do it. If not, I don't know. But what I do know is this. Our roadmap and our vision has always been this. S3 storage is a foundational layer of a long upward growth company. So essentially, once that S3 layer and is humming and has lots of customers and is doing all this stuff, we're going to add a ton of stuff on top of it. So, Lambda type stuff, CDN, DNS, you name it, all the AWS services. So, that's just sort of our philosophy on all of that. All right. That's going to be it for this week's call or month's call. We'll see you next month, and hopefully you gleaned a lot. This will probably take over the weekend again for me to edit it down and get it ready to go up on YouTube, but it'll show up on YouTube, and then you can review it, or if you didn't get to the whole thing, you can listen to it over. So thanks a lot for playing, and we'll see you guys next time.